And hello, everyone, and thank you for all coming on such a sunny, glorious London day to spend a day in a conference. My name is, and thanks for the brilliant introduction, so I'm Sophie Sparks, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make your data visualizations memorable. So because it is so warm in here, and it's probably not feeling that energetic, can I just get like a good nod? Who here has to present anything to in team meetings? Yeah, lots of nods. Brilliant. And people may have to occasionally publish results places, websites, part of reports. Yeah, definitely some nods there. Perfect. And you never know, we might actually have some reporters, journalism students, or people who might be making material for very broad consumption as well. So, a nod or two. OK, so we've got everyone here, that means, has to communicate information with data at some point in their careers or at some part of their daily jobs. Now, most people here, would you consider yourselves designers? Few nods? Few nods, rest of blank eyes. So I'm taking that as mostly no. And again, do most people here, would you consider yourself as in a PR, like a communication role, PR or something like that? One or two nods. OK, mostly no. So that means most people here probably don't think that communicating information is a core part of their work. And it is. And when you communicate that information, what do you want it to be? You want it to be memorable. So memorability should be a goal of every data visualization or piece of data, anything you produce that's going to be consumed by somebody apart from yourself, or possibly your colleague who sits at the next desk, who watches you work all the time. And memorability isn't something strange and out there and only designers can make memorable visualizations. That's not true at all. Everyone here writes emails probably every day, or they write clear text messages to people, and they write reports at work that have to be clear and easily understood. Now, I'm not sure. We probably don't have that many famous published novelists in this crowd here today. And if we do, brilliant. But just because you're not a famous published novelist doesn't mean you can't write clearly and communicate clearly with other people and tell clear and engaging stories. We all do it, despite not being famous novelists. So why don't we all make clear and easy and memorable data visualizations, even though most of us aren't professional designers? So what I'm saying is memorability is a goal, and it's what you should be aiming for in your visualizations, not just a nice to have. So from that introduction, you all know my name's Sophie, and I live and breathe data visualizations. Absolutely love it. And I see so many data vises that memorability is a really, really important thing to me. And that's why I'd like to share it with you today. So this is a quote from Herbert Simons from 1971. Don't feel like you have to read it all. What he's saying is we are living in a time where more and more information is being thrown at us. Think about it. We have 24-hour news cycles. We have Twitter, Facebook, social media streams. If you work with big data, your data is getting bigger and more of it and everywhere. And so we're having to communicate more and more things to everybody in a world that's already saturated with other feeds coming into everybody. And what Simons is saying is all of this stuff we've been bombarded with consumes our attention. So we are now living in an attention economy. Our attention is key. Is probably the most important thing we can give to anybody or any piece of material. In fact, advertising companies fight for your attention. Hundreds of people thousands of people around the world are paying huge amounts of money for one, extra nanosecond of your time on any ad in your Twitter stream. So with all of this information that's trying to take your attention away from the data visualization you want to present to somebody, you need to do everything you can to make that memorable. Now, how do you make a visualization memorable? It might sound a little daunting. And anecdotally, for a long while, there have been lots of different ideas floating around. Use great colors, use wacky graphs, put lots of pictures on them. There's sort of these, some of them pearls of wisdom, some of them just ideas or things that people like to do. But until recently, there hasn't actually been any rigorous scientific work around what concretely makes a visualization memorable. But a recent study done by brilliant Michelle Balkin and co-authors has analyzed a huge amount of visualizations out there in the wild, everything from journalism pieces through to scientific articles, to find what makes visualizations memorable. And they found there's 4 key things, 4 small, easy to do and easy to implement things that you can do to make your visualizations more memorable. So I'm going to go through those 4 now with some examples and show you how easy it is to implement small changes to make your visualizations more memorable. And what will making your visualizations more memorable do? It will mean if you're presenting your visualization to a group of experts in your field, so let's say you're presenting your monthly sales report to your boss in the team meeting, they will hopefully remember the actual most important number from that visualization. And if you're presenting to a broad audience, studies by sort of the group at Seeing Data have shown that memorable visualizations, people probably won't remember the identical, exact figures, but they will remember the essence of it, the trend, the most important key takeaway message. And so these can all be done with these upcoming 4 small things. Firstly, memorable content. Sounds really obvious. Memorable visualizations, anything memorable probably has memorable content. And that might sound a little tricky. It's not every day the information you're going to present is sensational. Most people probably aren't normally presenting about volcanic eruptions or something truly sensational that inherently will grab people's attention. And it isn't always appropriate to use completely surprising and novel visualizations like using virtual reality. That mightn't and often isn't appropriate for most people. However, there is a lot of things you can do to take your visualization from being utterly forgettable to being probably memorable. And then from being probably memorable to pretty good, and most people will remember the key takeaway message, even if you don't have a sensational topic to visualize in a out there, wacky, new type of visualization format. And so what are these things you can do? Firstly, minimize the effort readers need to understand your visualization. So this is implementing basic design principles. Going back to that analogy of writing clear emails to people, basic design principles is exactly the same for visualization. It's just using clear visual language, and they're really not hard to do. This is just one example. This is from NASA's Earth Observatory, and it's looking at how climate change is making spring happenings earlier. So they're looking at leaf budding and blooming flowers. And this has a few really good design principles. It's got clean use of space. We've got direct labeling, so you're not taking your reader's attention. They're looking at your visualization, getting all that visual input, and then having to jump and look somewhere else to read the semantic, the text input, to see what they're looking at, and jumping back to the visualization. You don't want that to happen. You want to keep your reader focused in one spot. So put all your information in one spot. Some people might have seen the Dark Horse Analytics little animated GIFs saying, here's a 3D bar chart, and they show to take away the 3D, take away all the noise in the background lines, directly label. If you haven't seen it, I'll tweet out a link afterwards. These basic ideas are really important. So one of the things they've done here is they've used direct labeling on the key national parks that this article is talking about. So you don't need to jump out of the visualization to a code on the side to see what they are and come back. They've used color very intelligently. Leaf color is green. It's intuitive. Bloom color is like a rose color. And they've also included, the color code isn't off to the side. It's actually included there within the visualization in the text. Very clever way to keep readers' attention in one place. So these basic design principles, anyone can use, and anyone can, and not just you could, but you should be applying to all visualizations you make. Next one, embrace new visualization options. With technology moving forward faster and faster and becoming easier and easier to create visualizations, you're not always limited to just a bar chart. You can create scatter plots, for instance, or you might be able to create a network diagram with reasonable ease. So embrace these new visualization options that new technology brings about. And what we've got here is an article from the New York Tribune from 1849. And this is to show that a line chart, which most of us would think is pretty basic, this wasn't basic. This was a new and an exciting type of graph to make. This was most likely either a woodblock print or done using punctuation marks. And because it's such a new and novel visualization, a new way of explaining information back in 1849, they've had to include a detailed description underneath to help readers understand what they're seeing. But note, they give their readers a lot of credit for their intelligence. They haven't gone, this is going to be too difficult. This isn't an intuitive way to understand this information or the best way to understand it. So we're just going to not use this new technology. They've gone ahead and done something different and novel at the time. And they've trusted that their readers are smart enough, if they give them a few prompts, to figure out what's going on. And so how does that translate nowadays? Here's an example from the New York Times by Hannah Fairfield. This is called a connected scatter plot, and it's looking at driving safety. So a connected scatter plot connects happenings in time where they happen. So this looks like, somebody driving around. And it really drives home the point that this is about driving, but it's also a slightly unusual data visualization type. But they've gone ahead and helped you try and understand it. They've given their credit to their readers' intelligence. They've used annotations with these little mini images of the visualization to help guide readers through what's happening and where it's happening. And now for this presentation, I've had to cut the visualization a little short. It actually continues down with the main text of the article around it. So embrace new visualization types and new technology. Here's another one, again by the New York Times. This is showing how animation actually can be really cool and also very relevant. This is from an article from 2016 looking at, I'm not sure if you guys have seen it, but looking at Katie Lackady and how fast she was swimming. So it's sort of like a real-time mini animated version of the race to show you where everybody was at relative at any point in time. Again, really, really interesting, and a great new novel way to visualize information. This will grab and capture your reader's attention and help make your graph more memorable. So again, those two things to help make your graph memorable: embrace new types of visualization, and stick to good, clean design principles. So the next one they're talking about was titles and annotations. Now, this is an often overlooked feature by most people. Who here really puts thought into the title they give any chart they make? More than I thought. That's brilliant. That was probably like a third of the group. So for the other 2/3, think about your titles and annotations. Now, why should you do this? I know many people, especially working in analytics or data science fields, think, I don't want to, I'm not a journalist. I don't want to lead my audience to, to bias them in any way. I'm presenting open and honest facts here. And you are. Having a good active title doesn't mean it has to be journalistic, sensationalized, clickbaity, or anything like that. Now, if you are conducting an analysis, you probably have a goal in mind. You want to see how sales have gone this month. You want to see if there's a significant difference between test scores from 10 years ago and from this year. You have a point to the visualization you're doing. So why don't you put that in the title? Tell people what they're looking at. And even better, if you can, tell them what you found. Don't stick figure 1 up here, and then you've got to scroll down and see. Figure 1 is showing us some sales over time. And that's not helpful. Figure 1 is not a good chart title, and neither is sum of sales for clients. Sum of sales for what clients? Your clients. And so give some thought to your titles. So here we can take a leaf out of a journalist experience. This is the Wabash Express from 1856. This is held at the National Library of Congress. And if you look at it, it looks like a newspaper with one key difference. Where are the titles? There are many different articles on this paper. This isn't just one ginormous 7-columned article. This is multiple articles, and you can just see there are little lines with dashes in between, breaking each one up. So journalists at one time didn't really think titles are that important, but now any news story, any newspaper you look at will have a title, and that title would be descriptive. And why is that? Because it helps people understand what they're seeing. And in an economy where our attention is key, if people are going to scroll by anyway, if they just read your title, at least they've taken something away from your visualization, opposed to nothing at all. And what are these good titles called? Well, they don't really have a name, but I like calling them active titles. This is a term coined, I think, by John Swabish, who has a brilliant podcast called Policy Viz Podcast. He talks about visualization and presentation. And so using active titles is what we should be doing. And here's a great example from Stephanie Evergreen of what an active title actually is. So we look at the first chart on the left-hand side, words spoken at debate. This is a pretty generic title. It tells you we're looking at words and at some debate, but it doesn't really tell you much else. If this was in an article, you'd probably find, at the bottom would say, words spoken by Trump and Clinton, in whatever debate. And that would be down here, and you'd be drawing your reader's attention away from your visualization, making it less memorable because they're having to split their attention between the visualization and the explanation on the side. In the middle, we've now used a slightly better title. Trump spoke more words during both debates. So that's probably the point of this analysis, which was who spoke more words during the debate. Now that title is telling you what this analysis was about, looking at who spoke the most words during the debate. And it actually tells you who did it. Trump did it. And cleverly, again, using color to tie in with a chart. And the last one has the best title overall. Trump spoke more words during both debates. And then it's got a subtitle. Therefore, deserves to be president or maybe just a blowhard. So this is a bit journalistic and a bit subjective. But the idea that under your title, you can also add the key takeaway message. In this case, Trump maybe spoke a bit too much, or he deserves to be president, or whatever you think the key takeaway message is. If you're conducting analysis, you know what your key takeaway message is. And when you present it to somebody else, you'll verbally tell them what that key takeaway message is. So why not put it on the chart itself? You're not going to be biasing people's opinions because you're telling them what you found. And the other part of titles is on using annotations, putting text on the viz. Embrace those annotations. They really help call things out. So when people look at visualizations, they look at two things. They will see the visual aspects of it, and that's what we looked at when we're saying make your visualization, use memorable chart types or make your visualization memorable. And then there is the semantic part, the text part. And the study by Balkan and co. found that the text is actually the thing much later after somebody's seen the visualization. It's the text, the title, and the annotations that people recall the most. So they don't really recall what the chart was or what it, maybe it was pretty, they might recall, but they're much more likely to be able to recall what the text was. So this is a chart from the Bank of England, just to show you that these memorability tactics can be used by anybody. Bank of England, probably not known for being, very sensationalist. They're very sound people. But here, they've used annotations really well. They're using good design principles, a direct labeling we see, great use of color. But they've got this annotation underneath telling us what is the main call out. They use color to enhance that. But they're saying, this point here, the actual growth has been consistently lower than the forecast. That's the important part of the visualization. And they've used an annotation to help call that out for you readers. So titles and annotations, anyone can do it. Everyone should do it. There is really no excuse, and it's so easy. So easy. Just a title. So that's probably the biggest bang for your buck. If you are trying to make your visualization memorable, use a title, a good active title. Another one, redundancy. Tell people the same thing over and over again. Now this principle probably works for many other things, and it definitely works in visualization. And in visualization, there are two types of redundancies you can have. You can have visual redundancy and semantic text redundancy. And if you use both, it will be even more memorable. So visual redundancy, this is using icons or a visual reminder to help enforce what's already written there. So this is from a journal article from PLOS, the Public Library of Science, by Colchamp and co-authors, published a few weeks ago, actually. I'm a bit of a science geek, and so I thought this one was fantastic. This is from a journal article looking at how charismatic animals actually face high extinction. We might think they're getting a lot of money, and so we don't want to donate to the, save the elephants or save the lions. But these animals, even though they are charismatic, they are in real need of our help. And how have they visually, what's the added visual redundancy to this? We've got African elephant, gorilla, tiger, and a picture of an elephant. And the picture of the African elephant is different from the Asian elephant. So we could tell them apart. You can even kind of see the size of the ears. We've got mountain gorillas and western gorillas. Those images look slightly different. We are reinforcing the fact that the words say leopard, and there is an image that we can recognize of a leopard. Other examples where you might see this are maybe flags with country names, especially we've just had the Commonwealth Games here. Flag, country name, you're reinforcing that textual element with a bit of visual redundancy. Maybe another one would be using company logos when you're talking about that company within a visualization. So it doesn't have to be gimmicky. It can be really enhance a visualization using visual redundancy. And text redundancy, the other half of the visualization, the text part. This is a chart by the Financial Times by John Byrne Murdoch, looking at football. And now I admit I really don't care at all about football. So this chart, and I'll just remove that, this chart inherently shouldn't interest me. I have no interest in football. But I'm engaged by it, and I will probably remember the overall impression of this because they've done some really clever things. We can see it's cleanly designed. We can see the use of color in they've got a good title, we've got a subtitle, and we've got the use of color in the subtitle to call out what's going on here. But also they've used text redundancy. There is, and I'll just zoom in on it, we can see at the very bottom there's your axis with the numbers, but they've also put the numbers inside every little histogram. So we're using numbers twice. We're calling out that number. A really great way to help make visualizations more memorable. And as a test, yeah, check a visualization out about a topic you're not particularly interested in and see if these principles actually help. When I was putting this presentation together, I remember seeing this on my Twitter stream, flicking by it, and I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember there was this something about football. It looked good. I remember some teams were doing a lot better than others. I can't remember what the teams were, but I'll go back and find it. And it's a great rule, that's a great example of using these principles can help make visualizations more memorable. And the last point that Michelle and her co-authors found was human recognizable objects. Now, this sounds like a bit of a mouthful, so we'll have a look at what they are. So these are objects we recognize, and these have a love-hate relationship in data visualization. Use them incorrectly, and they are chart junk. And what's that? So it's, we've got a graph, and somebody's like, put an image on it, put something cool to take people's attention off to the side. That will actually make your visualization less memorable. So using images for the sake of using images and not thinking and tying them into the visualization actually makes things less memorable and makes people probably ridicule your visualization more. But prudent and relevant use of visuals is really important. This is a quite old isotype from Mackenzie looking at the vital flame, I think it was called. And isotype charts use images to represent numbers. So each flame here will represent a certain amount of natural gas that's being produced. And it's really effective. We can quickly see how much natural gas opposed to manufactured gas is being used across various different countries around the world. And because these little flames, we're talking about gas, the little gas flames, they're relevant to the visualization, and they'll help make it more memorable. And it's not just isotypes. You can go ahead and actually add graphics to your visualization. Here's a really great example that came out earlier on this year from The Economist. This was looking at the relative sizes of various different space programs. So this was looking at when the Falcon Heavy, they were talking about the SpaceX program. And it's fantastic. These are the size of the actual, scale of the rockets. We've got a really clever, for reference, we've got a 747 there, a Statue of Liberty in shadow, and if you notice down the very bottom next to the 0, there's a tiny little person. And so this is a really clever way, when it's appropriate to do so, to add, and this could have just been done as a bar chart. So when it's appropriate, you think about adding human recognizable objects to a visualization. It will really help enhance the memorability of what you're doing. And even more than that, these are all white, and space shuttles are white. If they'd been hot pink, it would have detracted from it. They look like space shuttles because the color matches what they're doing, and they look like space shuttles, and it's appropriate. So those are the 4 things that Michelle and her group found made visualizations more memorable and more likely to be remembered, not just right after you look at them, but recalled, weeks later. And it'll also help people not just scroll by your visualization in their news feed or forget at the moment they walk out of that meeting. It'll help the key takeaway message stick with them and make your work more effective and more meaningful as well. So memorability, remember, is the goal of any visualization you make to share with anybody else. Anything you have to communicate to somebody or a group of other people, memorability should be top of your mind. And those 4 things are: make the content memorable, use engaging visuals, and use good design principles. And if your content is inherently very memorable, that's fantastic as well. But even if it's not, these small things will help. Titles and annotations, the easiest and quickest and biggest impact you can make on a visualization is use active titles, titles that explain what the reader is seeing and what the key message they should take away from it is, and annotations to call out any points of interest within your visualization. Redundancy. Tell them the same thing over and over again in different ways. Use icons or images to reinforce the text, and use more text or numbers to reinforce the text. Reinforce everything, everywhere. Tell people again and again and again, and they will remember. And lastly, human recognizable objects aren't just chart junk. Used appropriately and prudently, they can take a visualization from being a plain bar chart to amazing space rockets. That's a pretty big difference. So I hope you'll all go away now and use these 4 principles in the next visualization you make to share with somebody else. And hopefully you'll get lots of great feedback and people will remember all the hard work you've done analyzing that data and producing that visual. People will actually remember it afterwards as well. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I know it's getting very hot in here, so if you just want to exit into the slightly fresher air, I won't be offended. Thank you. So any questions, or everyone? Yep.
Hi, thanks for something really interesting, by the way. So out of the 4 sort of principles, so in my work, a lot of the charts I have to produce are kind of more of the dashboard variety. So I'm either working off live data, of which is continually changing.
Yeah.
And I was kind of thinking, the second titles and annotations was going to be one of the trickier ones to really sort of make the most of, because of course what's changing and what's interesting is you can't predict.
Well, you can actually, dashboards are a great example and probably one many people here have to make all the time. Depending what type of software you're using, you can have titles that update themselves. You can insert fields, or you can code it in to say if this number is, year on year bigger, change the word to say bigger, and if it's lower, change it to say lower. So depending on what software you use or what coding language you write in, it may be very easy or maybe a little bit trickier. But you can quite easily make a dashboard that says our sales are going up since last month, and that word up is actually a calculated item, and it will say down if we're going down, for instance. So you can do it. You just need to give a little bit more thought. And same with annotations. Maybe you want to put a threshold line and annotate that this is our minimum, minimum amount of, engagement line, and then you've got your, engagement score, and that line is there with an annotation telling people what it is. So that's another great way to sort of add annotations to a dashboard. At the back.
Thank you. What a beautiful talk.
Oh, thanks.
My question is a little bit along similar lines. I like to be pragmatic and use the right tool for the right job. And a lot of times it might come with a lot of extra effort to do some of these very sophisticated visualizations, like, for example, a fucking heavy rocket, so in like a coding environment. So what do you use, and when do you use which tool?
I personally use the tools I'm most comfortable with, whether they're usually the best for that job or not. Because, if you're good at using one particular tool, use it. And realize there'll be some limitations. So you mightn't be able to use all of these principles. Maybe you can't easily add images, but you could reinforce with, numbered, you've got a cumulative line chart, and you can put the number next to the end. So it's, number here now and the numbers on the axis, tie that in with the title. And maybe, if something was bad, you could change that from being a circle to an X, just a character. So you can sort of work around and with many different types of tools. I'm not particularly good with Illustrator or anything where you make sort of amazing looking rockets. But there have also been some quite clever examples recently where people have just made a bar chart. I'm thinking of one example by this guy, Kevin Flage. I can't pronounce his last name. He's based in the US, and this was, I think, part of a project called Vision for Social Good, which is helping charities and nonprofits get their information and their message out there. And he made a bar chart, but he put a clear overlay of a cup over it because it was about clean drinking water. And so the bar chart filled up. It looked like the cup was filling up with clean water. So that was quite a quick example, an easy example, but that could be done in Excel. So I think you can. You just know the limitations of your tools and try and be a bit creative sometimes in thinking around. Any other questions? Sorry.
I'm just wondering, even in my experience, I haven't built a lot of that work, but I was still spending 80% on data prep and 20% on building visualization itself, even if it's the end goal. Once you're getting better at building visualizations, do you already sort of build that in at the very beginning? I know that my data needs to look that way, and do you sort of sense that do you reduce the amount of time that you spend on data prep once you've done that sort of over and over again?
No. Data prep is the most time-consuming thing. You sometimes find horribly that you spend 60% of your time on data prep, 20% of your time on analysis, and the rest of the time plus some on formatting. You can bake some things in easily. One thing would be if you have very good, I'm not sure what you code in, but using appropriate color schemes. So depending what coding language you're using, you can have existing libraries, which is like, this is a good colorblind friendly color scheme, import it in from somewhere else. So you can, those sort of data prep bits which you might have to go back to afterwards, you can encode within that early stage.
So what's the role of interactivity?
Interactivity, that really depends what platform you think most people are going to be viewing the visualization on. If it's going to be, if you think people are likely going to print the report out, for instance, you're not going to have like an interactive visualization. If you think people will be most likely viewing it online and somewhere with a reasonable bandwidth, the last thing you want is like it's not loading, it's not loading. Interactivity can help, but it does have its fallbacks. It does take up a lot of processing power, and so if people are going to be viewing something on their phone, on the tube, constantly dropping in and out of like the Virgin-free Wi-Fi, whatever it is that you get like in the stations, know your audience. Maybe then it isn't the best time to use an interactive visualization. However, for things that are moving, let's say you could step through time, there have been some really great visuals by the Financial Times and the New York Times about global temperatures. And every year you can see the range of temperatures moving up. It's just a static little GIF. They've done it and then just captured it as a GIF. And then you can actually physically see year on year like it getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. So if you're looking at something that's progressing through time, where there's a natural progression, interactivity can be really helpful. But don't use it if it's going to skew how people think they could read or understand your visualizations. If you're going to have a blurry motion to make it look really artistic, but it means people aren't going to be able to get anything out of it other than looks cool, then maybe that's not the right way to use it. Yeah. Yeah. Just so people can't hear on this side, this gentleman's asking about, it's called scrolly telling. As you scroll on your phone, the part of the story you're in is updating. I don't think it's essential. It's just that content has been designed for people to read on their phones where they physically will scroll, or perhaps on a computer where they will scroll their mouse. And so you're tying in an intuitive action you're physically going to make with the article. It makes it can make it easier. Like it's that principle of keeping your readers within the visual. It's doing that to a sort of a new technology extreme, which is including the scroll. Other ones you do is a step through, click and you sort of step through each. I think it's really helpful, but you need to know where your readers are going to be reading. If they're going to be reading on their phone, it could be and probably scrolling, it could be really useful. Talking about that, some other really cool things you can do with physical space and a physical digital space, if that's a word. Let's say you're showing something with distance. I saw a visualization that was showing the distance between each planet in our solar system and the sun. And you physically scrolled, and there was blackness for ages. And occasionally they'll pop up a little fun fact about the place you're going to. But it really helped drive home the point that there was a lot of space. But that was appropriate for that, using interactivity and scrolling. So yes, I think scrolling can be very helpful and very appropriate, but only if that's how you think your readers will consume the information and you think it will make it easier for them to stay within the visualization doing that. Okay, guys, we've got a few minutes, so I'm going to let you guys out.
Yes.
And it's getting a bit warm. If you have any other questions, I'm going to be hanging around, so please feel free to come and find me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sophie.